Picture this. Imagine a creature that has been walking, well, swimming, this Earth since the actual time of the dinosaurs. 66 million years ago, when an asteroid literally wiped out 75% of the planet's species, this incredible animal just kept on going. It survived ice ages, shifting continents, you name it. I'm talking about the leatherback sea turtle, the largest turtle species on the entire planet. And here's the crazy part. No matter how far they swim, they always return to the exact same beach where they were born to lay their eggs. For India, that primary nesting ground is Galti Bay, right on the Great Nicobar Island. But today, that ancient, untouched sanctuary is the proposed site of a massive, unprecedented mega project. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a highly debated piece of source material that asks a really uncomfortable question about the future of this island.
So what does this all mean? The source material we're analyzing today poses this exact question. On one hand, you've got this development being pitched as a total strategic masterstroke, an absolutely crucial step for national security and economic dominance. But on the flip side, the author of our source argues that this is essentially a blueprint for India's biggest environmental disaster, leading to unimaginable ecological and human loss. We're going to neutrally map out the claims, the data, and the core arguments presented in this analysis so you can see exactly what's at stake here.
All right, let's dive into this.
We're breaking the explainer down into 5 quick parts: the mega project itself, the environmental catastrophe, allegations of fraud, debunking the strategic shield, and finally, security versus corporate profit.
Okay, starting off with Section 1, the mega project.
The scale of this thing is just mind-blowing. We are looking at an 81,000 crore rupee project. That is a massive, massive financial commitment aimed at completely transforming the southernmost point of India. And according to the plans detailed in the source, this isn't some distant pipe dream. The first phase of this colossal development is supposed to be fully operational by the year 2028.
So what exactly are they building? The project essentially boils down to 4 main components. You've got an international container transshipment terminal, a dual-use airport for both military and civilians, a massive 450 MVA power plant, and a sprawling commercial township. Now, the absolute kicker here is that township. It's expected to bring in anywhere from 3.5 to 6.5 lakh people. Think about that for a second. We're talking about dropping hundreds of thousands of people onto an island that currently has an incredibly small, mostly indigenous population.
Which brings us right into Section 2, the environmental catastrophe.
As you'll see, the source paints a pretty dire picture here, starting with the trees. There is a huge gap in the estimates. The government says, look, we only need to cut down about 7.11 lakh trees, framing it as just 1.82% of the total Andaman and Nicobar forest area. Sounds minimal, right? Well, the source argues that's basically a statistical sleight of hand because it actually accounts for about 15% of Great Nicobar's specific landmass. And it gets worse. Independent researchers, cited in the text, estimate that up to 1 crore, literally 10 million trees could be destroyed. The analysis stresses that these aren't just your average trees. They are centuries-old tropical rainforests that act like a giant natural air conditioner for the region. Wiping them out could drastically spike local temperatures and kill off rainfall.
But the damage doesn't stop at the shoreline. Remember those ancient leatherback turtles? The source notes that over 90% of their nesting sites would be completely destroyed. To build the port, the opening of Galti Bay will shrink from 3 kilometers wide down to a tiny 300-meter gap. On top of that, over 16,150 coral reef colonies are on the chopping block. Now, the government has proposed just relocating these reefs, but scientists quoted in the analysis, they literally call that scientific madness, pointing out that moving fragile coral on this kind of scale is basically impossible. Oh, and it also threatens unique species like the Nicobar long-tailed macaque. It's basically a domino effect of ecological disaster.
But the absolute heaviest claim in this entire source material is about the human cost. Great Nicobar is home to the Shompen Tribe, an incredibly vulnerable, uncontacted group of hunter-gatherers. According to the 2011 census, there were literally only 29 of them left. The source highlights a terrifying warning from 13 international genocide experts who explicitly call this mega project a death sentence for the tribe. Because they've lived in total isolation, they have zero immune defenses against our everyday diseases. The author argues that flooding their island with 500,000 outsiders could trigger an unintentional genocide, plain and simple.
Let's move to Section 3, allegations of fraud. According to the analysis, getting this project approved required some serious legal gymnastics. Look at this timeline the source lays out. Galti Bay had been a strictly protected wildlife sanctuary since 1997. Then suddenly, out of nowhere in January 2021, that protection was completely stripped away. Even crazier, the source alleges that the mandatory environmental impact assessment, a super rigorous scientific process that usually takes years of ground research, was rushed through in just 6 to 7 days. The author outright claims the data was cherry-picked to hide the real ecological damage.
And the author claims it goes beyond just rushing things. They allege actual procedural fraud. First, to legally take over forest land, a committee needs at least 2 scheduled tribe members. This one only had 1. Next, they needed mandatory approval from the local village council. The source alleges they got that approval from a council that didn't have a single tribal member on it. But here is the wildest claim. The source states that an official government map from 2020, which clearly showed extensive coral reefs, was literally altered in 2021. They just erased the reefs from the map, seemingly to hide the fact that they were about to build a port right on top of them.
All right, moving into Section 4, debunking the strategic shield.
Now, the big government defense for all this destruction is national security, specifically controlling the Strait of Malacca. To understand the author's counter-argument here, we got to define what a strait is. It's a narrow, highly constrained physical channel of water connecting 2 larger bodies. The Strait of Malacca is the crucial shipping lane linking the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea.
But the source argues the geography just doesn't add up. Look at this breakdown. The actual narrow choke points of the Strait of Malacca, the spots you could theoretically block, are way down near Singapore, where it's only 2.8 kilometers wide. Great Nicobar, it isn't even inside the strait. It's sitting out in the open Andaman Sea, 200 to 300 kilometers away from the entrance. The author argues that claiming you can physically choke Chinese shipping from an island hundreds of kilometers away in open water is literally a geopolitical impossibility. And even if India somehow could block that route, the source points out that China isn't stupid. They've spent the last 20 years aggressively diversifying their supply chains, specifically so they aren't reliant on Malacca. The text lists 6 major alternatives China already has up and running: pipelines through Myanmar, the port in Pakistan, direct oil from Central Asia, massive train networks to Europe, and even new Arctic shipping routes. Because of all this, the author dismisses the whole Malacca choke justification as completely outdated.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most controversial part of the explainer, Section 5. Security or corporate profit.
If it's not actually about national security, then what's it really for? Well, the source points straight to the government's own project documents. Mixed right in with the military infrastructure are plans for casinos, resorts, adventure sports, and entertainment clusters. The author is highly critical of this, asking how anyone can justify bulldozing an ancient, hypersensitive biosphere reserve for national security only to build tourist casinos.
The land usage numbers from the source are pretty telling. Out of the 116 square kilometers designated for this entire project, a staggering 114.9 square kilometers are dedicated solely to that commercial township. The analysis highlights that 11 major companies have already submitted interest to build this out, prominently including Adani Ports. So the ultimate conclusion drawn by the author is that this whole national security narrative is allegedly just a smokescreen. The real goal, they argue, is simply a massive land grab, handing over India's most precious primeval forests and natural resources to private corporations to turn a massive profit, completely ignoring the ecological and human cost.
And that leaves us with the final, very provocative question presented by the source material. Are we literally trading away our greatest natural treasures, turtles that survived the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, vibrant coral reefs, and uncontacted indigenous tribes, all under the guise of strategic development, just to line the pockets of private corporations? It is a deeply complex issue, balancing the official narrative of necessary national growth against these severe, arguably apocalyptic ecological warnings from independent experts. We've laid out exactly what the source material is arguing, so you can decide for yourself what to believe. और ऐसी वीडियोस के लिए follow, subscribe करना मत भूलना।